The first time I met Jason, he was standing in my kitchen eating a granola bar like he owned the place. He was a friend of my roommate's. One of those guys who somehow always found himself surrounded by people even when he wasn't saying much. The kind who lingered in the background but still managed to be the center of gravity. I remember watching him from the doorway that first morning, thinking how odd it felt to notice a stranger in such a familiar space. He looked over and nodded like we were old friends. "Hey," he said casually. "I think I drank your oat milk. My bad." I blinked, too caught off guard to even pretend to be annoyed. It's fine." He smiled, and just like that, Jason, this guy I didn't know, was suddenly in my life. He wasn't supposed to be staying long. Just a couple of nights, crashing on our floor after breaking up with his boyfriend and needing a place to land. My roommate had offered without asking me, but I didn't mind. I'd been through my own crash-and-burn relationship a few months back, and maybe there was something about a broken-hearted guy that I recognized. Something in his silence, in the way he kept checking his phone and never getting a reply. First, we didn't talk much. We passed each other in the hall. He helped me carry groceries up one evening. No small feat in our fourth-floor walk-up. One night, we both ended up in the kitchen at 1 a.m., eating leftover pizza in our pajamas like two divorced dads who'd lost everything. "You ever just feel like the rug got ripped out from under you?" he asked, chewing slowly. I nodded. "Yeah, that's how I felt for a while. Like I forgot how to stand." Jason didn't say anything right away. He just sat back, let out a breath, and nodded. "That's exactly it." After that, the silence between us felt different. Softer, like something alive and warm instead of cold and distant. He'd been sleeping on a thin foam mat in the corner of the living room, and every night I could hear him tossing and turning. I never said anything, never asked if he was okay. But one night, as I passed by to grab a glass of water, he looked up at me from the floor with these tired eyes and said, "Do you ever get used to sleeping alone again?" I don't know what came over me. Maybe it was the way his voice cracked, or the way he didn't try to hide how lost he looked. I just walked over, sat down beside him, and handed him the water. "You don't," I said honestly. "Not for a while." He drank half the glass before speaking again. "I'm sorry I'm taking up space." "You're not." And that was the first night he fell asleep with his head resting on my shoulder. It didn't feel like a big deal at the time. We were just two guys in a too small apartment trying to feel less alone. I didn't pull away. I didn't move. I just sat there until his breathing evened out and I realized he was fast asleep. I stayed like that for an hour before slipping away quietly, my shoulders still warm where his head had been. But that became a pattern. Some nights, I'd find him curled up under the throw blanket, still fully dressed, staring at the ceiling like it held answers. Other nights, he'd ask if I wanted to watch something, anything, to drown out the quiet. We'd sit side by side on the couch, elbows brushing, knees barely apart, always with that invisible thread pulling tighter between us. Then came the night everything shifted. It was raining hard, one of those summer storms that makes the windows rattle. My roommate was out of town, and it was just the two of us in the apartment. We'd been watching some dumb reality show, neither of us really paying attention, when the power flickered and went out. Jason looked at me. "Well, guess that's our cue." I laughed. "Guess so." I started clearing the coffee table when he said, "I'll sleep on the floor again. Don't worry." But when I came back from brushing my teeth, he was still sitting on the couch, looking hesitant. "You okay?" I asked. He hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, just don't really feel like being alone tonight." There was a pause, a long, loaded one. "You can stay in my room if you want," I heard myself say. "It's just, the bed's small." Jason looked at me, and I swear the room went quieter than before. "I don't mind." So he followed me in, barefoot, quiet. I handed him an extra pillow, and he stood there for a second before slowly lowering himself onto the far side of the bed. "Thanks," he said softly, already curling into himself. I turned off the light, climbed in next to him. Neither of us said anything else. The space between us was maybe 6 inches wide, maybe less. I could hear his breath. I could feel the warmth coming off his skin. I told myself I'd sleep on the edge, facing away, keeping my hands to myself. But something changed in the middle of the night. Because when I woke up, I was holding him, not like I accidentally rolled over, not like I reached out in a dream. I was holding him like I'd meant to, one arm draped around his waist, my chest pressed to his back, our legs tangled under the covers. And he wasn't moving. He wasn't pulling away. He was breathing slowly, steadily, and his hand, his hand was resting over mine. Like maybe he'd meant to fall asleep that way too. I didn't move. Not because I was afraid of waking him up, though I was, but because, in that moment, everything inside me felt like it had gone still. I was afraid that if I even breathed too loudly, it would break whatever this was. Jason's back was warm against my chest. He smelled like fabric softener and rain, and his fingers, still lightly curled around mine, made it impossible to convince myself this was just some sleep-induced accident. He'd chosen to hold on. For someone who'd spent the last few years overthinking every interaction, every glance, every almost touch with a guy I liked, this moment felt too clear to misread. And still, I didn't know what it meant. I laid there, heart thudding in my chest, counting the seconds, wondering how long I could stay like that before it became too much, wondering if he'd wake up, pull away, say it was nothing. But then, without a word, he shifted slightly, closer. His fingers tightened around mine, just a little, but it was enough. Jason was awake. He knew. He wanted this. "You awake?" I whispered, voice barely there. There was a pause. Then he nodded just once. Neither of us said anything for a while after that. The silence was heavy but not uncomfortable, like we were both waiting, listening to the same invisible thing between us. He finally spoke, voice low and husky.
"I'm sorry."
"For what?" I asked immediately. "For this," he said. "For not knowing what I'm doing. For needing this. For being too much." I turned my head slightly, so my forehead rested against the back of his neck. "You're not too much," he exhaled. Not a sigh exactly, just something quiet and uncertain. "I didn't plan to crawl into your bed like some lost puppy. I asked you to stay. Yeah. But I didn't plan to let you hold me. I didn't plan to hold you." That made him chuckle softly. "So we're both idiots, huh?" I smiled into the dark. "Apparently." And just like that, something shifted again. The heaviness cracked open, and something gentler slipped in. Something easier to carry. I felt him relax a little. His body, which had been stiff with apology, melted back into mine. We didn't kiss. We didn't make promises. We just stayed there, holding each other in the quiet, while the rain tapped the windows like it was trying to lull us both into believing this was okay. And maybe it was. Maybe it was okay. The next morning, I woke up to sunlight spilling through the blinds, and Jason, still asleep, curled up against me like he belonged there. I stayed still, watching the way his lashes flickered with dreams, the way his brow softened in sleep. And for the first time in months, maybe years, I didn't feel lonely. Not even a little. Eventually, he stirred. His eyes opened slowly, landing on mine. "Morning," he murmured. "Morning," I whispered back. There was a beat. Then, "So, this happened." I gave him a crooked smile. "Yeah, it did." He sat up slowly, rubbing his eyes. "I should probably move back to the couch." "If that's what you want," I said carefully. He looked at me, really looked at me, and then he shook his head. "No, I want to stay." He laid back down beside me, this time on his back, arms behind his head like he was finally at ease. "You ever think about how weird it is that we find comfort in people we barely know?" he asked, eyes on the ceiling. "Yeah," I said. "But maybe it's not about knowing someone. Maybe it's about being known." Jason turned his head to face me. "And you think you know me?" I swallowed. "No, but I want to." That made something soften in his expression. He nodded slowly. "Okay." We spent most of that day in pajamas, making coffee, quietly slipping into each other's rhythm. He didn't talk much, but he didn't pull away either. And that night, when we climbed into bed again, it wasn't awkward. It wasn't something we needed to explain. He didn't say he'd sleep on the floor. He just slid into the space beside me like it was his. And I held him again, because it felt like mine too. There's something about the quiet intimacy of shared space that strips away all the usual defenses. The next few days blurred into a gentle routine. Mornings with half-warm coffee, music playing softly from my phone while we both scrolled through our feeds, not saying much. Afternoons where he'd help me cook, leaning against the counter, always a little too close, like he wasn't sure how to pull back anymore. Evenings that started with a movie and ended with him falling asleep curled against my chest, his hand resting somewhere it hadn't the night before, on my waist, my arm, once even tucked beneath my shirt like he was trying to anchor himself to something real. And maybe he was. I didn't ask for more than he gave. I didn't push. But I noticed everything. The way he stopped checking his phone constantly. The way he laughed more, ate more. The way his shoulders didn't hunch as much when he walked through the apartment. But still, I didn't know where we stood. Were we two guys who were healing, who'd found warmth in a shared bed? Or was this something building slowly, carefully, like a new foundation forming beneath the ruins? I wanted to ask, but I was afraid of ruining it. One night, we sat on the couch watching a movie neither of us really cared about. He had his feet in my lap, his head resting against a pillow. My hand rested on his ankle, casual, familiar, but not accidental. About halfway through, he muted the TV. "I need to tell you something," he said. I looked at him, already bracing for it. "Okay." He sat up, pulling his legs under him. He looked nervous, eyes flicking between mine and the floor. "When I left my ex," he started, "I told myself I didn't want to be with anyone for a long time. I told myself I needed to figure out who I was again before I could be with someone else." I nodded, keeping my face neutral. "But then I came here, and you were just there, kind, quiet. You didn't ask for anything. You didn't try to fix me. And somehow, that made me feel safe." His voice cracked a little on that last word. He swallowed and kept going. "I didn't mean to fall asleep in your bed, and I didn't mean to keep doing it. But every time I told myself I'd go back to the floor, I'd look at you and think, I don't want to." I nodded slowly. "You didn't have to ask." "I know. That's what scared me." He paused. "I don't know what this is," he said. "I don't want to rush into something I'll mess up. But at the same time, I feel like I've already let you in, and I don't know how to undo that." I reached for his hand. He didn't flinch. His fingers closed around mine like they belonged there. "You don't have to know what this is right now," I said. "I don't need a label. I just want you to be here, if that's what you want." His eyes shimmered just a little. "It is." And with that, the quiet between us wasn't tentative anymore. It was chosen. He leaned forward, pressing his forehead against mine. We stayed like that, breathing the same space, hearts pacing in time. And when he finally kissed me, it wasn't explosive or dramatic. It was soft, careful, like we both knew it mattered. Like we were both trying to say, "I'm here," without using the words. That night, when we got into bed, he didn't hesitate. He laid his head on my chest, arm around my waist, fingers tracing the hem of my shirt. I ran my hand slowly through his hair, and we stayed like that until sleep took us. I didn't dream. I didn't need to. Everything I wanted was already there, warm, steady, breathing beside me. When I woke up the next morning, I didn't have to wonder if it had been a mistake. He was already awake, looking at me like he'd been thinking the same thing I had. He didn't say good morning. He just whispered, "Thank you." And I whispered back, "You don't have to thank me." "I do," he said, "for not making me sleep on the floor, for not making me feel like I had to." We laid there a while longer, sunlight crawling across the sheets, his thumb brushing lazy circles against my skin. It wasn't perfect. We didn't have a roadmap. There were still things we needed to talk about, boundaries to draw, pasts to unpack. But for the first time in a long time, it felt like we were both in the right place at the right time. And neither of us had to be alone anymore. Over the next few weeks, it became clear that Jason wasn't just crashing at my place anymore. He was staying. His bag, which used to sit packed by the front door, was now half unzipped beside the couch, clothes spilling out like roots taking hold. His toothbrush lived beside mine. He had a favorite mug in the cabinet, the chipped navy one he always reached for without thinking. But the biggest change wasn't physical. It was the way we moved through the apartment now. Like we were tethered by something invisible but strong. I'd be in the kitchen making dinner, and he'd show up behind me just to wrap his arms around my waist. We'd brush our teeth at the same time, bumping shoulders and grinning through the foam. And at night, we no longer danced around the question of where he'd sleep. He belonged beside me. There was comfort in the routine, but also an edge to it. Like we were walking along the edge of something deeper, unspoken. We hadn't had a real "what are we?" talk yet, not out of avoidance, but maybe because it felt too fragile to name. Still, some things didn't need words. One night, we were lying in bed, the glow of my laptop casting soft shadows across the room. I was scrolling through a dumb article when he rolled onto his side and said, "Can I tell you something?" I looked at him, heart already preparing for the worst. "Of course." He hesitated. "The last time I lived with someone, it ended ugly. There was yelling, broken dishes, silence that went on for days. I felt like I was walking on glass for months. And even though I know this is different, I still get scared it'll turn into that." I set the laptop aside and reached for his hand. "You're safe here. I promise." "I know," he said, voice quiet. "That's what makes it so terrifying." I didn't need him to explain. When you've only known love as something that hurts, safety feels foreign, like you're waiting for it to vanish. "I get it," I said. "It's okay to be scared. I am too sometimes." "You are." I nodded. "I think I've been waiting for you to decide this was temporary, that you'd suddenly remember I'm just the guy who happened to have a spare pillow." Jason looked at me, eyes soft. "You're not just anything." He leaned forward, kissed me like it meant something more than comfort. And this time, I knew it did. We spent that night tangled together, limbs intertwined like we were trying to erase any space between us. And when I woke up, it was to the sound of him humming softly in the kitchen, wearing my hoodie and making pancakes from scratch. "You're spoiling me?" I said, grinning as I leaned against the doorway. He turned, spatula in hand. "That's the plan." I walked over and wrapped my arms around him from behind. "I could get used to this." He leaned back into me. "Then do." There were no big declarations, no sudden confessions of love. But in those small moments, in breakfast made with care, in the way he always waited to lock the door until I was safely inside, in the way his hand found mine without thinking, I knew exactly where we stood. He wasn't just healing. He was choosing me. One night, maybe a month after he'd first showed up with nothing but a backpack and a broken heart, I found him sitting on the fire escape, looking out over the city. "Can't sleep?" I asked, stepping outside to join him. He shook his head. "Just thinking. About." He took a deep breath. "How strange it is to go from feeling like you're nobody's person to realizing you might be someone's home." I sat beside him, bumping his shoulder gently. "You are." He looked at me, really looked, and smiled. "So are you." We sat there in silence, the city buzzing around us, the air cool against our skin, and I realized that the quiet between us had changed again. It wasn't the quiet of strangers, or even the silence of people too scared to speak. It was the kind of quiet you get when there's nothing left to prove. Just presence. Just peace. Just us. Eventually, we climbed back inside, back under the covers, back into the space that had once felt temporary. He didn't say he'd sleep on the floor. He never would again, because he wasn't just staying the night anymore. He was staying for real. And I wasn't just the guy who offered him a place to crash. I was the guy who held him every night without question, and woke up every morning, still holding him. A few weeks later, my roommate came back from his trip. He walked in, luggage dragging behind him, and froze mid-step at the sight of Jason and me sitting shoulder to shoulder on the couch, sharing a bowl of popcorn, feet tucked under the same blanket. He blinked, then raised an eyebrow. "So, this is a thing now?" Jason stiffened beside me. I could feel it in the way his hand paused halfway to his mouth. I looked over at him first, like I was checking for permission. He gave me the tiniest nod, like a breath held too long finally let go. "Yeah." I said. It's a thing. My roommate shrugged and kept walking. Cool.
I'm glad.
You two look good together. Jason didn't say anything until the bedroom door clicked shut again. I thought that would be harder, he said softly. Me too, I admitted. He leaned his head on my shoulder. I guess it doesn't have to be complicated, huh? I kissed the top of his head. Not unless we make it. It felt like another turning point. Not a dramatic one, but the kind you only recognize in hindsight. The moment things stopped being just between us and started becoming part of the world around us. From then on, we didn't hide it. He came with me to the little market down the block. He stood beside me in the kitchen when I cooked for friends. He started leaving little notes in the margins of my notebooks. Stupid things, funny things, sweet things. One morning, I found a napkin on my desk that said, I don't know how I found this, but I'm not letting go.
J.
I stared at it for a long time before folding it carefully and tucking it into my wallet. Still there. We still had our hard days. He had nightmares sometimes. Woke up breathing hard, shaking slightly, eyes unfocused. When that happened, I didn't ask questions. I just held him until he settled, until his heart remembered it was safe again. I had my own shadows, insecurities that crept in late at night, whispering that maybe I wasn't enough. Maybe this would fall apart like everything else had. But every time I started to spiral, he'd reach out. Sometimes with a joke, sometimes with a touch, and sometimes with nothing more than a steady look that grounded me. One night, as we were lying in bed, facing each other in the dark, he whispered, I've never had this before. What do you mean? This. Someone who doesn't give up when I get messy. Someone who stays. I reached for his hand. You don't have to be anything but you. He swallowed hard. That's the scariest part. But I didn't pull away, and neither did he. That night, I realized something. We weren't just healing with each other. We were healing through each other, like two broken pieces that happened to fit where they cracked. Over time, he started calling this place home. Not out loud at first, but in little ways. Want me to grab something on my way home? Do we have oat milk at home? I left my book on the bed. Can you grab it when you go home? And one evening, without ceremony, he walked through the door, kicked off his shoes and said, God, it feels good to be home. I didn't even realize I was smiling until he walked up to me and kissed it off my face. That night, we made dinner together and danced in the kitchen to some stupid playlist he'd made called Cooking with My Favorite Human. We spilled sauce, burned the garlic, ate on the floor because we were too tired to clean the table. And after dinner, we laid in bed, limbs tangled, his head on my chest like always. He said it so softly, I almost didn't catch it. I think I love you. My chest tightened. Not in panic, but in that overwhelming way your heart responds when it hears something it's been waiting for, without realizing it was waiting. I didn't hesitate. I know I love you, I whispered back. He looked up at me, eyes shining. Yeah. We didn't need more than that. No grand speeches. No orchestral music. Just us in the quiet, holding each other like the world outside didn't matter. He used to say he'd sleep on the floor. Used to say he didn't want to be a burden. That he didn't know how to stay. Now, he sleeps in my arms, every night. He wakes up in the same place, every morning. Not because I begged him to stay, but because, somewhere along the way, this stopped being just a place he landed and became a place he belonged. And every time I wake up holding him, I'm reminded, the floor was never an option. Not for someone who was always meant to be held. Our first real fight came out of nowhere. It was one of those long, humid days where everything feels heavier than it should, the kind where even silence sweats. I had gotten home from work later than expected, exhausted and irritable. Jason was already there, sitting on the couch with a bowl of cereal balanced on his knee, scrolling through his phone. I walked in, dropped my keys a little too loudly, and muttered something about how the kitchen was a mess. Jason looked up, eyes narrowing slightly. I was going to clean up. I just haven't gotten to it yet. You've been here for hours, though, I said, not meaning for it to come out as sharp as it did. I don't get how hard it is to load a dishwasher. He set the cereal down a little too hard. I'm sorry, I didn't schedule my day around your expectations. And just like that, it unraveled. Not because of dishes. Not because of cereal. But because that's how it always happens. Tiny cracks letting the deeper stuff bubble up. You've been off for days, I said. You barely talk to me anymore. He stood up. Because every time I try, you act like I'm in your way. That hit harder than I expected. I blinked, caught off guard. What are you talking about? Jason's voice was tight. I know this wasn't supposed to be permanent. I know I kind of just stayed. But sometimes it feels like you're waiting for me to leave. I didn't know whether to be angry or just heartbroken. I never asked you to leave. I never even hinted at it. Yeah, but you don't ask me to stay either. That stopped me. Because he was right. Not once had I told him he belonged. I had shown it, yes, in gestures, in touch, in time. But I had never said it plainly, in the way that he clearly needed to hear. Jason ran a hand through his hair and looked away. Maybe I just need to figure out what I'm doing with my life. Not just my living situation. Everything. Are you saying you want to go? My voice cracked halfway through the sentence. He didn't answer at first. And that silence, God, that silence, felt like the longest minute of my life. But then he shook his head slowly. No. I don't want to go. I need to feel like I'm wanted here. Not like I'm tolerated. My throat tightened. I crossed the space between us and stopped just short of touching him. You are wanted here, I said. You're wanted, Jason. Every single day. But I've been so scared of losing you that I didn't want to say anything that might make you feel trapped. He looked at me, wounded but softening. I don't feel trapped. I feel unsure. And sometimes that turns into fear. I get that. I do. But I'm in this. I'm not going anywhere, unless you ask me to. He stepped closer. Just a little. I don't want you to go. I want to more, actually. I think I have for a while. Something in my chest loosened. I exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. Then let's figure it out, I said. Together. He reached out and finally touched my arm. Okay. And just like that, the fight deflated. We didn't solve everything that night, but we found our way back to the same side of the room. Later, lying in bed again. After the dishes were finally done and the lights were out, I felt his fingers thread through mine. No more floor jokes, he whispered. I smiled. You think I'd really let you go back down there? He chuckled. No. I think I'd probably drag you down with me at this point. Well, that'd be a terrible night's sleep. He turned, pressed a kiss to my collarbone. Then I guess I'll stay right here. You better. And he did. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. Seasons changed. I watched him smile more, laugh louder, take up space like he'd forgotten he ever felt like an imposition. And I changed too. I got quieter in ways that made room for him. I became more certain, less guarded. I stopped holding my breath. Because love, real love, the kind that sneaks up on you in the softest ways, requires surrender. Not the dramatic kind. The kind where you let someone stay. The kind where you stop flinching when they reach for your hand. The kind where you wake up holding them over and over again. And realize you never want to wake up without them. One morning, a year from the day he first crashed on my floor, I woke up before him. The sun was barely up. He was still asleep beside me, hair messy, face calm. I reached over and tucked the blanket back up over his shoulder. He stirred a little and mumbled, "What time is it?" "Early," I whispered. "Go back to sleep." He sighed, relaxed again. But then, just as he was drifting off, he murmured something so soft I almost missed it. "I think I've loved you since that first night." And I just smiled into the silence. Because I knew. I'd loved him since the first night, too. Since the moment I found him curled up on the floor and woke up holding him like he was already mine. And somehow all along he was